Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Josh here. Welcome back to Morning Meditations. I hope you had a great weekend. I hope you were watching our worship service and worshiping with us. It's so important that we recognize that when you're watching at home, you are worshiping with us. We are together in that time, worshiping together, and that is so important because it's hard. I know it's hard to be separated from everybody right now, especially if you're playing it safe and you're not going out. So these meditations and our worship services are really the keys to being able to stay connected with the church family. So I hope you're speaking to other members of the church and your brothers and sisters within our family, and you're helping each other out because that's what it's all about. Okay, we're picking up our study today in Judges, and we concluded our study of Gideon last Friday. Remember, Gideon ruled over the people of Israel for 40 years, and he delivered them from the Midianites and the Amalekites who were oppressing them and making life really hard for them. So Gideon, remember, he's this like really weak, scared guy who's threshing wheat on the floor of a wine press. And at the end of the story, we see that he is this mighty warrior who defeats these enemies, and he rules over the land. So in the 40 years that he's ruling over the land, he ends up going back to his father's territory called Ophrah. Now, he has 70 sons. He's got a bunch of wives, no doubt, an estate, and he's got servants and things. He's amassed this wealth because of his status, and he has 70 sons. Well, somewhere along the way, he had another son, 71, with this mistress in a town called Shechem. So Gideon dies, and the scripture says that the people, right after he dies, they went back to worshiping the gods, the Baals. Baals are like these other gods that were the gods of the Canaanites, who Israel was supposed to drive out of the land when they came into the land of Canaan. And they didn't do that. They failed to do that. And in failing to do that and failing to follow God's instruction, they end up setting themselves up for a pattern of demise, where they turn away from God and they turn to these gods, the Baals, who of course are not God, and we see the pattern persist. So that's what happens when Gideon dies. They go back to worshiping the Baals, and there's sort of this power vacuum, right? Gideon's dead. He's been the leader for 40 years. What next? Well, Abimelech goes to Shechem, and he starts spinning his own propaganda. And he says to his mother and his uncles, hey, my father's dead, and wouldn't it be better for Shechem if I was the leader here? I mean, we could set me up as king. It'd be a whole lot better if than these 70 knuckleheads who are my brothers. Who knows what they're going to do? Maybe they're going to come in here and do funky things, and we don't want that. So wouldn't it be better if me, your nephew, bone of your bone, flesh of your flesh, wouldn't it be better for everybody if I were the ruler here? I don't know. Maybe think about that. So he plants the seed, and then his uncles and his mother start spreading the word among the leaders of Shechem, and the idea takes hold, and they're like, yes, this is a good plan, good idea. So they fund Abimelech. They give him resources and money, and he takes those resources and money, and Scripture says that he hires worthless and reckless men to be his entourage, his posse, right? And his thugs. So he takes his thuggish posse, and he goes and he kills his brothers. He goes to Ophrah. He seeks out his brothers. He pulls them all out of the city, and he kills them on a stone, except for one, Jotham. And Jotham is the youngest, and he escapes and he hides. And Abimelech kills 69 of his brothers, all on the same stone. It's a massacre, right? Basically eliminating any chance that he would be contested as the next ruler of Israel. Well, because Jotham escaped, that's not the case, right? And Jotham Speaking up in this prophetic way, he goes on top of Mount Gerizim and he shouts to all of Shechem. He says, "Listen to me, Shechem, so that God will listen to you." And he tells them this fable. And it's this fable about the trees of the land, and how all the trees get together and they're searching for a king to rule over them. And first they go to the olive tree, and they say to the olive tree, "Be our king." And the olive tree turns them down. And then they go to the fig tree, and they say to the fig tree, "Be our king, rule over us." And the fig tree turns them down. And then they go to a vineyard. They go to the vines of the grapevine, and they say, "Be our king." And the grapevine turns them down. And finally, out of desperation, they go to the bramble. They go to the thorn bush, and they say, "Be our king." And the thorn bush says, "Okay, yeah, I'll be your king. Why don't you come over here and rest in my shade and take refuge, because I accept." And then Jotham explains how the trees are like the people, and you get what you get, right? You get what you ask for. And he delivers this sort of prophetic curse, and he says, if you have dealt justly with my father, Gideon, and everything you've done here is kosher, right? No pun intended. Then let things be good for you. But if not, if you have been unjust, if you have betrayed the legacy of my father and everything that he's done for Israel, then let fire come out of the bush of Abimelech and consume the people of Shechem. And let fire come out of the city of Shechem and consume Abimelech. So he delivers this curse, and then he just runs away, right? He runs away to this town called Beer, spelled just like beer, but not beer. And then pause. There's sort of a break in the story, and we'll pick up with that part next time. But the first part of the story, let me just kind of unpack it a little bit for us and give you some food for thought. So remember how I said when we started this study of Judges that the quality of the judges starts to just wane and deteriorate as we go further along in the book. And Abimelech is no exception. He is terrible. We see from the onset that he is he's the son of a king, the bastard son of a king, and he's got his own agenda. He's a usurper. He wants power. No doubt being the bastard son of a king doesn't leave him very much. Well, Gideon isn't a king, but he's the closest thing Israel had at the time. But he's got no claim to anything, right? He's got 70 brothers ahead of him in line, and then there's him. So he takes it upon himself to spin his own propaganda and seek his own power, and then he kills his brothers, right? So he usurps the power. And then he doesn't surround himself with men of moral fiber or character or godly men. He hires reckless thugs and worthless men to do his bidding. And so Abimelech is a thug. He's not a quality leader. And I want to just pause there, because this is something for us to reflect on. We see the pattern of Israel. When things are good, they're close to God, or whether they drift away from God. When life is good and there's affluency and bountiful crops and everything is fine, they turn away and they start worshiping these other gods, the Baals, maybe for whatever reason. Maybe it's more fun, or it's more free, or they can do whatever they want without being held accountable. But when things are bad, they cry out to God, and God is there. Now, this is a pattern in our own lives too for a lot of people. And maybe there's a connection with our level of affluency, what we have inherited in our life from our parents. If your parents have been wealthy and affluent and they have made life easy for you, how has that affected your relationship with God? Not saying that you're not a good Christian if you have inherited wealth, not at all, but something to think about. Also, if the opposite is true, if you've had to work very hard, you came from a poor family, how has that influenced or shaped your relationship with God? And maybe combining those things. If there are times in your life where you have had affluency and things have been great, and life is good, if you analyze how close you were to God during those times, how does that compare to the times when things were tough? Maybe there was scarcity, and you found yourself maybe praying more passionately or fervently or relying on God more. Is that a thing for you? That's what I want you to consider today, and we will pick up our study of Abimelech tomorrow. All right, I love you guys. I'll see you tomorrow.